Good evening, everybody. I've got now 7:01. It is July 9th, City of Owen Sound Council. This being the hottest meeting of the year, we're almost all wearing our ugly shirts because we're trying to stay cool. Some people's shirts are uglier than others, and some are a little bit shy about showing them off. But anyway,
Some are cooler than others too.
we did not have a closed session tonight. We're starting tonight. Start with staff, call for any additional business.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'd like to have a discussion regarding the Public Information Center that will be conducted tomorrow from 4 to 5:30 regarding the 10th Street Bridge replacement and environmental assessment associated with it. It'll be held here at the Bay Shore Community Center in this specific room.
Okay, good. Put down the list to discuss it later. We'll hit it twice. Anyone else from staff? Seeing none. Council? Councillor Kepke?
Little item on Canada Day fireworks, Your Worship.
Thank you. Councillor Gregg?
Just a further mention on the motion from a previous meeting on the increase of base funding for conservation authorities.
Going back to Councillor O'Leary.
A couple of points to make on the City Hall renovations.
Councillor McManaman?
Nothing at this time, Your Worship.
You won't want to apologize for the shirt or anything?
Just you said it's the hottest night. Some are cooler than others.
Councillor Lemon?
Thank you, Your Worship. I have an item pertaining to heritage
Thank you.
that I wanted to pass around.
Councillor Thomas, anything? Councillor Dodd, nothing, and I'll have a couple really quick ones. Okay. Disclosure of pecuniary interest and the general nature thereof. Anyone? Seeing none. Down to number 6, confirmation of council minutes.
Moved by myself, Your Worship, and seconded by Councillor Lemon that the minutes of the regular council meeting held June 25th, 2018 as printed be adopted.
And all in favor? Those are carried. Number 7.
Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Lemon, that City Council now move into Committee of the Whole to consider public meetings, deputations and presentations, public question period, matters arising from correspondence, reports of city staff, consent agenda, committee minutes, matters postponed, motions for which notice was previously given, and additional business.
And all in favor? And that is carried. Thank you. So we're now in Committee of the Whole. We do have public meetings tonight. We have 2 with regard to land surplus and dispose of municipal property. So I turn it over to Ms. Bloomfield.
Thank you, Your Worship. Notice of this public meeting was posted on the city's website and published in the Sun-Times on June 29th, and no comments were received. Those in attendance for this public meeting need to sign in the sign-in sheet located on the table just inside the door for communication purposes. Personal information provided at this public meeting is collected under the authority of the Municipal Act. The information will be used for the disposition of land process and will form part of the public record. Questions about this collection should be addressed to myself, Brianna Bloomfield, City Clerk. The purpose of this public meeting is to provide the public with an opportunity to comment on the city's intention to declare surplus and dispose of municipal property. The subject lands are south of the Bayshore Community Centre and adjacent to 1370 2nd Avenue East, and are part of the 14th Street East Road Allowance, which was stopped up and closed in 1936. The red portion in the aerial photo is owned by the Miller Group, and they are requesting to purchase the 2 blue sections identified in the aerial photo. At this point, there is no indication of what the intended purpose of these parcels of land is. Any potential development will go through the appropriate planning process. The city's official plan designation for the subject's lands is waterfront mixed use, and there's no identified roads or trails for this land identified in the official plan. These lands are zoned MC or mixed use commercial. For the process to date and next steps, at the June 11th council meeting, I prepared a report respecting declaring surplus and disposing of municipal property. At this meeting, council directed that staff provide notice and afford the public an opportunity to comment on the city's intention to declare surplus and dispose of municipal property. Notice of the public meeting was posted in the Sun-Times and on the city's website on June 29th. Depending on the input received from the public tonight, there may be a subsequent report or bylaw will be presented at the July 23rd council meeting to declare the land surplus. If the land is declared surplus, a further report would be presented to council on the potential disposition of land. And now we welcome feedback from the public.
So is there any member of the public that wishes to comment? Other than Bill being back there, I don't see anyone else. Bill, do you wish to comment?
I don't think so, just your worship.
So it would appear that we have no public comments, so I guess that concludes that public meeting. If we can move on to the next one for the next parcel of land.
Again, this notice of public meeting was posted on the city's website and published in the Sun-Times on June 29th, and no comments have been received. Anyone in attendance for this public meeting need to sign the sign-in sheet located on the table just inside the door. This is for communication purposes. Personal information provided at this public meeting is collected under the authority of the Municipal Act. The information will be used for the disposition of land process and will form part of the public record. Questions about this collection should be addressed to myself, Brianna Bloomfield, the city clerk. The purpose of this public meeting is to provide the public with an opportunity to comment on the city's intention to declare surplus and dispose of municipal property. Subject lands are on the north side of 2125 16th Street East and consist of a portion of the 16th Street East or Highway 26 connecting link. The red portion in the aerial photo depicts the subject lands. Heritage Grove Center, Inc. owns 2125 16th Street East, adjacent to the subject lands, and has requested to acquire these lands. At this point, there is no indication of what the intended purpose of these lands is. Any potential development will be dealt with through the appropriate planning process. The subject lands are within the East City Commercial designation of the official plan and are Zone C2 with a special provision. Process to date and next steps. At the June 25th council meeting, I prepared a report respecting declaring surplus and disposing of municipal property. At this meeting, council directed that staff provide notice and afford the public an opportunity to comment on the city's intention to declare surplus and dispose of the municipal property. Notice of the public meeting was posted in the Sun-Times and on the city's website on June 29th. Depending on the input received from the public tonight, there may be a subsequent report or bylaw will be presented on the July 23rd council meeting to declare the land surplus. Should the subject lands be declared surplus, a further report would be presented to council respecting the land exchange. And again, we welcome any public feedback.
And again, I don't see anyone coming to the microphone, so I think we've fulfilled our duties to hear comments from the public. I'll now declare the public meetings closed. Thank you, Ms. Bloomfield. So we can move on. Number 9 is a deputation and presentation from Mr. Fisher.
Harborfest, we have a big event coming up. I just wanted to come by tonight and touch base on some of the finer details regarding Harborfest, which will take place this Saturday, July 14th, along our east and west sides of our inner harbor. So for those at home watching or any council that has any questions, Harborfest is the city's newest and biggest event. When staff got together and thought about what this event might look like, a few key points came to mind. It had to make a splash. So no pun intended, but we'll get to that later. And it had to be different and something that really got people excited about our waterfront. It's also very important, we didn't want it to clash with any other summer events that were happening around the same time. So you look at Canada Day that happened on July 1st, Street Fest and the Hottest Street Sale this past weekend, which were fantastic events. And then we have Harbor Fest coming up on July 14th. So that's a pretty great start to the summer for the residents of our city and visitors. Our inner harbor, stretching right through our downtown, is a great spot to be. Both sides. There are a lot of people who already recognize that, but for those who haven't had the chance to come down and enjoy this, or those that don't experience the waterfront very often, this is a great opportunity to come and do that. And finally, Harbor Fest is intended to be an event for everyone, an inclusive event and a celebration of Owen Sound. And we're there, almost. This Saturday is a full day of activities, beginning at 11 a.m. And going straight through until 10 p.m. or shortly thereafter. Activities throughout the day. There's a whole gamut of fun things to do and for people to take part in. We have live entertainment at our main stage, highlighted by Logan Stats at 7 p.m. and the Practically Hip taking the stage right after them. And if there's anybody that's familiar with the show, CTV shows The Launch, Logan Stats was featured on that show. So he's an up-and-comer, if you will, and does have a number of pretty decent songs out. So certainly people are also no stranger to the Tragically Hip, and obviously we can't have them here, but the Practically Hip is the next best thing. Should be mentioned that Logan Stats is also a part of Hartwood Hall's Indigenous 150 Plus event that day. So if you happen to be in the downtown core and don't plan on coming to Harbor Fest, which you should, you can take that event in. We have over 35 vendors and partners that include fun giveaways, interactive games, educational opportunities, both sides of the harbor, with the licensed area being right in front of Mudtown Station. There's a classic car show stretching along 1st Avenue East, all the way towards 10th Street. So certainly activities to take people from one side of the harbor right to the other. And all the way over to the Community Waterfront Heritage Center, who will be having their annual fun day that day as well. We will go in the water as well. At Last Adventures will have activities in the water, and Owen Sound Police Services will be hosting their first ever Battle in the Bay, which is a tug-of-war between two floating docks. So we're using the west side, we're using the east side, and we're using on the water as well. So certainly lots going on. Of all those vendors, we have 5 local beer, wine, and cider vendors, and 5 to 6 pretty unique food vendors as well. So there should be something there for everybody. Mudtown Station will be open along with their patio, and again, this is going to be a celebration of Owen Sound. With so much activities going on, there are some logistic items we want the public to know about as well. There's a few important details regarding parking that we want the public to know about. So this is more for public information than anything else, but we have a map on our website and have circulated it on social media and through additional media channels. This map identifies all the municipal and non-municipal parking lots that the city has received permission to use for Harbor Fest. The Bayshore Health Unit parking, those lots are in close proximity, and the Miller Group, who operates the dog park, was kind enough to allow us to use their parking for accessible parking and barrier-free parking. So we will have that enforced as a barrier-free and accessible parking area as well. Staff also wanted to highlight that all municipal lots, we're encouraging foot traffic to flow freely through the downtown. Yes, we want people to come to Harbor Fest, but we think by parking in some of the municipal lots or on-street parking that is available downtown, we'll certainly encourage people to visit those shops, stores, and so people can see for themselves just how easy our downtown and waterfront is to access in one foul swoop. It should also be noted for council that there is an abundance of privately owned parking lots in close proximity to the event. Staff several weeks ago circulated a letter to all businesses, landowners, and tenants within a 250-meter radius of the main event stage. This letter talked about everything that Harbor Fest was about, everything that we're trying to do to bring people to the downtown area and their stores. And we asked for feedback. If anybody had an issue, they were to contact city staff. We had several people contact with to tell us that they'd be happy if people used their parking lots. So certainly we will have those identified that day as well, and Investment Planning Council being being one of those. Attendees are also encouraged to use city transit to get to either side of the harbor for the event. Our buses are accessible, air-conditioned, and operate in close proximity to the events on either side. So if there are people throughout town that are worried about getting as close as they can certainly utilize city transit as well. And the community is excited. We're starting to hear a lot of positive buzz. Staff is certainly excited. Carly MacArthur, our events facilitator, has poured a lot of energy into this, and we're hoping for great weather. If it's pouring out that day, that's Carly's fault too. But we're certainly hoping for good weather. It's supposed to be nice. The response has been fantastic at all levels. I'd also be remiss if I didn't thank our sponsors. Our presenting sponsors, Core Partners Group and Investment Planning Council. They were a huge part of our Festival Canadiana last year and immediately stepped up with one phone call this year to support the event. Coca-Cola, our new beverage supplier, has stepped up to the city events in a big way, not just HarborFest. They will also have their new Hug Me machine there. So if there's any members of the public who are partial to Coke or just need a hot beverage, or a cold beverage, sorry, all you have to do is show up to the Coke booth, hug the Coke vending machine, and out will pop a nice cold Coca-Cola. So that's certainly exciting. As well as Barry's Construction. Barry's been a huge supporter of all city events for a long time. Barry stepped up in a big way. And finally, if anybody's looking for event information, you can visit owensound.ca/harborfest. Our parking information is on there, a schedule of events, and we will certainly keep our social media channels updated throughout the week and during Saturday, July 14th for all pertinent details that the public needs to know and wants to know.
Good. Questions? Go ahead.
Yeah, if you could go back to the parking map.
Sure.
First Avenue West appears to be only one block of that is parking, and it goes up to 8th Street. You see where I'm talking about?
Yes, I do. Yep.
Would that not be included in our parking area?
That's a great question. When we pick off the city-owned parking, I'm trying to picture in my head exactly where.
It starts at the yoga studio.
Okay,
and
sorry.
goes to the library art gallery.
So that would be used by the public as well.
And so I just thought it should be on the map as well.
Okay, yeah, I can definitely circle back and make sure that we haven't missed any lots of any sort, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Others? Go ahead, Marion.
Just a further comment on the parking. Parking on Saturdays is free.
Correct,
Right?
yes. Yep.
Right.
Yeah, people are definitely encouraged to utilize all parking available within the city on municipally owned lots to get where they need to go, whether it's from the downtown to HarborFest or from HarborFest to downtown, where there's certainly lots of places to visit.
Okay, and then you said the Indigenous 150 plus the Indigenous film that is shown at Heartwood, and I think that's at 1 p.m.?
1 p.m., correct.
So that's another event if you don't
Yes,
want
and
to
there
be in
is
the hot
a
sun.
link to that as well on our website, Your
Okay.
Worship.
What was the other thing that went through my mind? Oh, Carly was pretty good at controlling the weather for Canada Day, so I'm betting she'll pull it together this week.
Trying to make it a few degrees cooler for those that are there for morning tonight, but you can only
Good.
bring so many shirts to sweat through.
So thank you very much for
It
your
could be.
presentation, and we look forward to being around the harbor this Saturday all day long, both sides of the harbor. Should be fun.
Correct. It will be fun.
Good, thank you. Public question period. Seeing none. Correspondence received, we have none, so I'm at number 11 down to number 12. Reports of city staff, starting with the community planner with regard to Georgian Bluff's planning application. Margaret?
Thank you, Your Worship. Just briefly to summarize the report, the city has received notice of complete application and public meeting for a Township of Georgian Bluff zoning bylaw amendment application number Z1218. The public meeting for this application is later this week, July 11th, 2018. The subject lands are before you. It is a map on the screen provided by the Conservation Authority with their comments. The lands are located in the Sunset Strip on the north side of Highway 6 and 21 between Bird Fuels and the Great Canadian Retail Outlet. The lands are narrow at the front and broaden behind Bird Fuels where the property backs onto the Potawatomi River. And the application is to rezone the lands from planned development and environmental protection to C4 space extensive commercial and environmental protection. The City of Owen Sound does not currently supply water or sanitary services to the subject lands, and the Sunset Strip is not an identified settlement area. The report was triggered by policy CS 81 because of the location in the Sunset Strip within 1 kilometer of the city and because of the proposed commercial zoning. Staff have reviewed the application as it could impact the interests of the City of Owen Sound related to servicing, the viability of commercial nodes and employment areas, and the potential for cumulative environmental impacts. There was limited information available to help evaluate the application. Staff are recommending the following, that the City Council request the City Clerk to provide a copy of the staff report and Council's resolution to the Township and the County, request information from the County and the Township regarding how the application conforms to the Provincial Policy Statement and County of Grey Official Plan, requests a copy of any new comments or further staff reports on the subject application, and requests any notice of further public meetings or information, and certainly the notice of decision.
Good, thank you. Any questions? Councillor O'Leary?
Thank you, Your Worship. I just, more of a comment. Maybe Margaret wants to comment on it as well. Just wondering, you know, I live in Woodland subdivision where if you cut a tree down in that subdivision, there's going to be phone calls left, right, and center, and people complaining and what's going on. And I went up to look at this lot, and it's completely cleared. Every tree is cut down, and that goes right back to the Potawatomi River. And I'm just wondering if you wanted to comment on that. I'm not sure if we get treated the same by the Conservation Authority or in cases like this, but I'm just curious.
Do you want to reply?
Thank you. I would just say that that's part of our recommendation number 2, I guess, is that we are requesting further information from the county and the township with respect to their policy framework and how this complies with it. There were significant woodlands identified by the Conservation Authority on the property and in the county official plan.
Okay, thanks, Margaret. With that, I would be happy to move the recommendation.
Okay, Councillor Lemon?
Yeah, is part of that land not actually hazard land?
Go ahead.
Yes, part of it is identified as environmental protection. That's not the portion proposed to change. The zoning on that, I believe, would stay the same.
But I'm just wondering if they're, when you had the map up there and seeing the exact relationship to the pot, how they're going to handle sewage concerns me because they're not that far away from the river.
Any reply? You don't have to. So that falls under one of the questions that we're asking about. Yeah. Good. Any others? Councillor O'Leary has moved it. All in favor? That is carried. Thank you, Ms. Potter. Next one is also from the Manager of Community Services or Community Development, but I think it'll be Mr. Fisher.
Again, thank you. So city staff has received 2 applications from mobile food vendors to operate on municipal property. Council will note that while a mobile food vendor or food truck does not require an agreement with the city to operate on private property, an agreement is required for operation on municipally owned land, save and except where a special event such as Canada Day or Summerfolk is concerned. In such instance, the business would be included under the umbrella of the event holder's hawkers and peddlers license. So as mentioned, we have 2 mobile food businesses who are requesting approval of an operating agreement. The first being Sugar and Ice, a pedal-powered ice cream tricycle operated by Miss Erin Osachuk. And Dickie D's comes to mind if you're looking for a picture of what this might be. That predates me. Miss Osachuk is enrolled in the summer company program with Grey County's Business Enterprise Center and is requesting to operate primarily along the Inner Harbor, downtown core, Kelso Beach, and the Tom Thompson Trail right behind us here throughout the summer. The second, Mr. Wilson, is the operator of the Big Bay General Store ice cream trailer that serves locally made homemade ice cream. The Big Bay General Store has been in existence since 1862 and has now put their famous ice cream operation on wheels. Mr. Wilson is requesting to operate at TD Harbor nights, which he has been very well received, as well as Kelso Beach on selected weekdays. Both Mr. Wilson and Ms. Osachuk have obtained an Owen Sound business license and provided the city with the required insurance and permits. Building, planning, and engineering staff have reviewed both applications and have no concerns. And as you will note here, photos of each mobile food business along with planning comments were attached in this report. Being that each vendor has fulfilled the required obligations by the city staff, council is requested to approve a bylaw to authorize the mayor and clerk to execute an agreement respecting the operation of a mobile food business with Zach Wilson of the Big Bay General Store, and approve a bylaw to authorize the mayor and clerk to execute an agreement respecting the operation of a mobile food business with Michelle Manero on behalf of Aaron Osachuk of Sugar and Dice.
Councillor Dodd?
Thank you, Your Worship. I would be more than happy to move that recommendation. For one, I'm glad that we're supporting a summer company. That's obviously going to be a good business for the student, and so it's exciting to see a Dickie D back trolling the harbor front. And Big Bay General Store, that's great ice cream, so how do you say no? So I'll move that recommendation.
Okay, any questions? Seeing none, all in favor? That is carried. Thank you. 12C, report from the city clerk, elections.
Through you, Your Worship, the voting period for the 2018 municipal election is from October 12th to October 22nd. There is a city council meeting scheduled for October 15th, which is in the middle of the voting period. I am recommending that the October 15th council meeting be cancelled to ensure fairness in the campaign process during the voting period. I'm also recommending that the September 24th council meeting be moved to October 1st so that there isn't a huge gap between council meetings. The Art Gallery Advisory Committee has a meeting scheduled for October 1st at 5:30, so if council approves my recommendations, the Art Gallery Advisory Committee meeting will either need to be cancelled or changed. Any changes to the council calendar will be posted on the city's website.
Good. Councillor Kepke?
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm happy to move the recommendation with the inclusion of keeping the art gallery meeting and moving it to October 15th. The momentum has just got going in that committee, and I think we need to keep the momentum moving. So I'd like to see that meeting changed to October 15th.
Okay, so with that, you're okay with that? Any other discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? That is carried. Thank you. 12D. Oh, you again. It's Brianna night.
The Inn on the Bay is a hotel. The Inn on the Bay Hotel is located on 2 parcels of land. The city is the tenant under a 99-year lease from the Grey Sauble Conservation Authority of the parcel that contains the main hotel building described as Part 1. And the city is the owner of the parcel that the parking lot is located on, which is described as Part 2. The city in turn leases both parcels to the hotel owner. The city was last approached by the owner of the hotel to provide consent to transfer the existing leases to Victoria Inn on the Bay Corporation in 2007. The city consented to that transaction and was aware that Victoria held the leases as trustee for Genesis Real Estate Trust. In September of 2017, Genesis Real Estate's trust was wound up and transferred its interests in the leases to Genesis Hospitality, Inc. Through inadvertence, the city's consent was not obtained for that transfer. Genesis Hospitality, Inc. has requested confirmation of the city's consent to the 2017 transfer of the leases to correct the oversight. Genesis Hospitality, Inc. has entered into an agreement to transfer its interest in the leases and the hotel to 2633267 Ontario, Inc. The transaction is conditional upon a number of matters, one of which is receipt of consent from the city to the proposed agreement. The draft agreement has been reviewed by and is to the satisfaction of the city's solicitor. It is staff's recommendation that the council direct staff to bring forward a bylaw to authorize the mayor and clerk to execute the agreement to ensure that business continues at the Best Western Inn on the Bay.
Good, thank you. Councillor Lemon. So moved. Councillor Lemon has moved it. Any questions? Seeing none, call the question. All in favor? That is carried. Thank you. Now we transfer to the other side of the clerk's department. Curtis.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just a routine housekeeping report for this evening. Commissioners Great Lakes, one of the parking enforcement officers for the city is no longer with Commissioners Great Lakes, and as is the normal process, they hire a replacement officer to go forward. This report is asking council to direct staff to bring forward a bylaw to amend our appointed officers bylaw to appoint Mr. Bob Bannister as the parking enforcement officer and remove Mr. Martin Durbin as a parking enforcement officer.
Thank you. Councillor Dodd?
Thank you, Your Worship. I just have a general question. And I know in our corporate services minutes, as we'll see later on, we have kind of designated the role of appointing some of these positions to staff because there's so many changes when we're doing it on private lots. Is there a reason why we continually get staff reports back on this that come to council for this direction of the change for those positions?
In this case, through you, Your Worship, this is to this type of report would typically go through the Committee of Corporate Services. However, due to the fact that the officer has been hired at this point, we are trying to move his authority forward quickly by bylaw.
So I understand. I wasn't meaning more of that. I was meaning more, we see, that's a position that we see a lot of changeover in. And I'm saying, does that come to council because we have a contract with them? Or is that something that could be designated to a staff to appoint their own positions so they don't have to be bringing reports to council?
Go ahead.
Thanks, Mayor Boy. As it'll be shown tonight in the minutes coming from Corporate Services, the last report was a report that spoke exactly to that. It was the delegation of authority to the clerk's department to process these so that it does not come to council.
Mind you, that's for private lots, right. And that'd be for the hospital. That wouldn't include this. This would be a separate.
It would not. Councillor Dodd is absolutely correct. The report that went to Corporate Services and will be outlined tonight was speaking only to private lots, which would not include our officers employed by Commissioner Great Lakes as per the contract. So it can be delegated. To answer your question, is that could be delegated if that's council's wish. They ended up falling very similar. I had written one report for the committee on private lots. This was something that came almost directly after, and obviously begs the question of potential delegation of authority, if that's council's wish.
Go ahead.
Thank you. That'd be obviously be a notice of motion, would it not? So
Or you can send it back to the committee. This is coming here specifically because we have a...
I can bring it up as a notice of motion in committee.
Yeah. Or here, but it seems you probably get a committee report anyway.
Yeah. Sure. I think Marion has.
Go ahead, Marion.
Your Worship, can we not just receive this report and refer the matter to the committee to deal with it as a...
Well, I think we need to approve because we've got somebody there. So we need to approve the report that's before us, but then we can look at it further down the road if we want to change the bylaw. Go ahead.
Thank you, Worship. So I would move the recommendation to put this on the table and prove this, and then I'll make a notice of motion regarding following the similar staff reports in corporate services to follow similar staff-directed report about appointing these officers.
Move the first one first, and then I'll think.
You'll think of it. Okay, I'll move the first one.
Okay. Any discussion on that one? So we're moving the recommendation that's in the report. All in favor? That's carried. Given that you're going to...
Could I move a motion, Your Worship, that we request staff to provide a report to Corporate Services regarding parking enforcement on private property?
On private property?
On city property, sorry.
Is that any different than what I'm asking?
No, she just jumped you.
No, I just don't know that we need to go through notice of motion, do we?
No, that was what we're about to discuss, but
and I think
go ahead and make it.
It does need to go through a notice of motion, does it not?
No, well, not if we're asking for a report.
My recommendation would be, because we're not making a decision, we could do it as a motion tonight because it'll be a subsequent report at a committee meeting. So we're not making any decisions this evening.
I'll do whatever you just said.
But I think that's what Marion just did.
Marion, you did whatever she just said.
Okay, so I think Marion moved. Any other discussion on that one? So it's a motion to request a report to go to committee. So all in favor? That's carried. And with that, I think we're at the end of staff reports. So on to consent agenda. Back to Ms. Bloomfield.
Through your worship, on the consent agenda this evening is reports respecting Summerfolk, the Emancipation Festival, the Dog Show, and the Ladies Provincial Fastball Championships. There is a planning notice that had no concerns to report, and there are minutes for receipt from the Police Board and the Library Board. The Georgian Bay Folk Society received a hawker and peddler's license for Summerfolk, and there's correspondence received which is presented for the information of council. A full listing is available at 13I.
Thank you. Councillor Thomas?
Moved by myself that the City Council receives items 13A to 13I on the consent agenda dated July 9th, and further that the recommendations contained in reports 13A to 13D be approved.
Okay, any questions? Seeing none, all in favor? That is carried. Now if we can go back to 13F, which is the minutes of board and committee for Owen Sound Police Services. Councillor O'Leary?
Thank you, Your Worship. These minutes were from a long time ago, back in May. So I just made some quick points. There was a total of 15 ride checks that resulted in 3 impairment charges. The finance report showed a small surplus. There's still 1 extra person on duty at the court building, covered for the cameras. There's $38,000 in the third-party record checks account. And in addition to what Brent Fisher had talked about with Harborfest, as a partner in next weekend's Harborfest, Owen Sound Police Service will be conducting an event titled Battle of the Bay. The tug of war event has 4 teams confirmed, but still has room for a total of 10. The event will be on the water, and you can contact Mike Daze at the Owen Sound Police Service for more details.
Thank you. Any questions for, go ahead.
Yes, having noticed a couple more poles been knocked down by accident on 10th Street at Shoppers Drug Mart, do we get insurance payment to cover that cost through the police would lay a charge, obviously.
I'm going to bet that Councillor O'Leary doesn't want to answer that, but Mr. Ritchie does.
Thank you, Your Worship. Where we can get the information off the license plate, if it's reported, absolutely, we go through our insurance company to get rebated for those.
You know, it's just with the amount of damage there, I imagine the car would stop pretty quickly. I mean, 2 poles. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Thomas, anything on the library?
Lots of business as usual, lots of events at the library, a lot of focus on the upcoming roof project, which is going to be a major effort, as well as the replacement of the floor in the library. And the board will be undertaking a strategic planning update in September to sort of chart the course for the library and what the priorities are over the next 5 years.
Public process?
For now, this is a board process.
Good. Thank you. Any other questions? Good, thank you. I think we're down to 14, committee minutes from corporate services. Councillor Gregg.
Thanks, Mayor Body. Had a few good reports that the committee took a look at in our June meeting. The first report was our monthly time management data for the fire department. I'd like to point out that you've got a column in your information that is titled LYTD, kind of short form for last year to date. It's probably more representative of the totals for last year, and we'll see that changed in the future because as the numbers move along, you'll see that they reflect very closely kind of a third or an accurate ratio of last year's. But I would like to point out we had 4 fire calls in May. Total fire loss was $3,000. And of particular interest, perhaps to council, is that there was only 2 sick days attributed to the fire department. I know in so many workplaces nowadays, the focus is on how many people are off for illness and sick, but to have only 2 sick days is very good and is very positive when it comes to the offsetting overtime that would be accumulated if people were sick. So hopefully the health and wellness and continues of our crew at the fire department. We had a report on an unsuccessful property tax sale. This is at the bottom of the escarpment off of 5th Avenue East, just off of 7th Street. Tax arrears were in the amount of $51,452. There can be small amounts of that which are county and education taxes. which will be charged back proportionately. The house had long ago been demolished, and some of the costs of that are incorporated into the total arrears of that $51,000. The lot backs onto the escarpment, and with current zoning, and I could be corrected by Ms. Potter, who's here tonight, but current restrictions, or current zoning restrictions would largely prohibit a lot of action on that lot. So committee's recommendation is to write off the arrears and vest that property to the city. Neighboring landowner will receive a letter just to ensure that their personal property is not on the city property moving forward. We had a report on the issuance of final tax bills for 2018. There is a flyer or a leaflet or an insert in that which shows that our percentage of emergency, or of the budget which is attributed to emergency services, is 47% for the current fiscal year. One interesting thing moving forward that we're trying to promote is that we get more residents utilizing our website to enroll for e-billing for their tax bills. You can do that by going to www.owensound.ca/e-billing tax. It's very user-friendly. It'll ask for your basically your tax roll ID and your personal name and information, and then you can move forward with e-billing as opposed to the old stamp system, which the city's trying to cut down on costs moving forward with more people utilizing that. We had a tax billing and collection policy report. In the past, the city has not had a formal policy. The changes to the current procedures that are in place are that tax registration may commence after 2 years, not necessarily will, but that's a change from the current 3 years. Also, an extension agreement for a registered property can be approved by the treasurer instead of through the bylaw process. And after taxes in arrears or have been in arrears for 1 year, the city may collect rent from tenants until taxes are paid in full. We had good discussion on that particular item, and it is in the Municipal Act to provide an allowance for that. So the city is following other processes in place in incorporating that into our policy. We had a similar report for outlining a new utility billing policy. We haven't had one in the past up to date, so changes to current procedures include a billing designate application, which will form a legal and binding contract between the customer, owner, and the city. The draft form is attached if anyone had any questions on the form that staff would be using. It also allows for a one-time lifetime leak adjustment per location, and I'll speak more on that particular item in a moment. And also then the recovery of outstanding utility accounts. The one-time lifetime leak adjustment per location is an adjustment which someone could apply for. No adjustments will be made for bills less than $250 in amount, and the flow differential must be greater than 20% of consistent H2O or water consumption at the address. Adjustment will be considered after all leaks have been repaired and verified with an actual meter read. Adjustments are not considered for disputed bills over 6 months old in age. Payment equivalence to historical usage is required during the review process to keep the account current. And a form must be completed and returned within 21 days after receiving the bill. I would point out that ineligible items would include irrigation and lawn watering, swimming pools, and plumbing problems, as these are sometimes very difficult to track and irrigation and swimming pools are at times draining right into the city sewage system as well. This lifetime leak adjustment has been implemented by some other municipalities, and staff can work to maintain tracking by the address and by the individual on a go-forward basis. So, John Smith is moving forward from location to another location in 8 years. We're able to track both the address of an adjustment made in the past and also who was at the residence when the adjustment was applied for and made. So that was for information, and the draft is attached. We also had a subsequent verbal report on a deputation before the committee in May regarding a customer's bill. That was on a water consumption issue. Our staff tested and found the water meter to be accurate. The customer has had a new meter installed, which they did not pay for. The city installed the new meter, and staff have tested and had accurate reads on the new meter, which was installed. Now, I would note that despite the new one-time leak policy, if council so choose to implement that, this would not qualify, and committee approved a motion that the city, effective July, bill for water utility consumption due, including all penalty and interest charges owing to that customer. Now, I would mention that the wastewater consumption charges were already reversed for that particular account. We had a report for an amended lease for the professional center. The original lease was not recognized by MPAC to provide the municipal capital facility exemption during the period of occupancy of the municipal offices being in the building. And we had a report, a very good, thorough report on our annual parking review. This is the second year we've had this information come forward. We did not have a lot of discussion on that report, as Councillor Kepke has informed the committee that there will be an upcoming public meeting through the DIA committee on evaluating downtown parking. But there is some great information in that report for everyone to take a look at, and I'm sure that we'll be referring back to in the near future. Overall capacity usage was 36.6% in our parking system. Only 2nd Avenue in the 800 and 900 block in the metered lots were considered high, as well as 9th Street, which is only 4 spaces, and that's in front of Fabric Center and Sprout Cafe in the 100 block of 9th Street. So, and then, like I say, there's only 4 spaces there. We had information showing that ticket revenue is down significantly. Officers are suspecting and reporting that better compliance is largely to be attributed to that. Information on spillover parking to the adjoining residential areas is also provided in the report. So oftentimes we get complaints from or concerns from residents on 4th Avenue or 7th Street, 3rd Avenue West, as Councillor Thomas would be familiar with, potentially. But I know I hear them in winter. People can't even pull their car out of their driveway on 7th Street to blow or remove the snow out of their own parking lot or out of their own driveway, because the street is being consumed through the day by people using it for day parking instead of the municipal lots. So like I say, some outstanding information is in that report. And lastly, we had, as spoke to earlier, report allowing for the delegation of authority on changes to the parking enforcement officers on private lots to staff. So with that, I would be receptive to any questions, and beyond that, ask for approval of those minutes.
Moving the minutes for approval, and any questions? Councillor Lemon?
Well, question number 1 in the leakage process, it says any bill over 6 months will not be eligible. But what, I'm assuming the timing of that is from when the appeal starts, because an appeal might take 6 months. And so is that the clear thought of it? Once somebody phones in and says, look, I've got a $3,000 water bill, that's when, once they've notified us, then the 6-month rule does not apply, because sometimes this can take time.
I'm going to go to Mr. Ritchie to reply to that.
It would be 6 months from the date of the actual read, Councillor. We do have some estimated bills, so the intent would be, your meeting was read on June 30th. You would have to appeal prior to December 31st of that year. It'd be from the date of the read, would be my thinking moving ahead. I did not attend the meeting, but I'm sure that's the theory.
That's one question. And why the reducing 3 years to 2 years in terms of tax arrears?
If I could, Your Worship, some properties, we want to ensure that the value is still there through a tax sale, depending on some of the charges that may be added back to some properties for various standards that may be enforced, with water bills, wastewater bills that are also added to taxes. We want to ensure that we have the opportunity to advise council that maybe after 2 years we should start that process. It takes a full year to go through the process, so you still wouldn't have it sold for 3 years. If we wait for 3 years, we want to make sure that the value is still in the building.
Any other questions? Seeing none, all in favor? That is carried. Thank you. Matters postponed, nothing. Motions for which notice was previously given. Councillor O'Leary.
Your Worship, I'm withdrawing that motion. I think if anything happens with that lot in the future, it would have to come back through council anyways, and that's really all I was looking for, so I'll just withdraw my motion. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. 17, discussion of additional business. Going to go back to Dennis.
Thank you, Your Worship. Tomorrow night tomorrow afternoon between 4 and 5:30, we'll be conducting / hosting a public information center here at the Bayshore Community Center, specifically in the Christy Hare Room. This information session is regarding a very important and a very necessary project, the replacement of the 10th Street Bridge. In attendance will be municipal staff, as well as our members from our consulting engineering firm dealing with the project. The idea is to be able to address residents' concerns and provide them with necessary information so that they can understand what this project will entail. So we would like to encourage as many residents as possible to come out and meet with staff and have informal discussions. And if we can't provide the information at that specific time tomorrow afternoon, we'll definitely have follow-up for any of their questions that can't be answered. Once the meeting or the Public Information Center is terminated or closed, we'll be going into Operations Committee meeting held at 5:30 in this same location, at which time Mr. John Slocum will be making a formal presentation regarding the environmental assessment to the Operations Committee.
So open house at 4, so if you've got questions, you come at 4. There'll be staff to talk about, then the actual presentation will be at 5:30.
That is correct.
So if you're working until 5, you can still come at 5:30 and hear the presentation that'll be made to the committee on the 10th Street Bridge rebuilding.
Absolutely.
Good. And that's right here at the Bayshore.
That is correct.
Good. Thank you very much. Anyone else have any questions? That's a pretty important meeting. It's going to be one of our biggest projects, I guess. Well, I guess the wastewater treatment was a pretty big project, but this one's going to have a little more impact. Thank you very much. Council, starting with Marion.
Thank you, Your Worship. It's summertime, and tonight I seem to be all about free. So free parking, free activities. We certainly enjoyed the Canada Day fireworks that were held recently. And I was over on the west side of the harbor and was certainly expecting to be paying a donation when I exited the Bayshore parking area. However, there seemed to be a lack of volunteers to collect those donations. So anyone who enjoyed those fireworks, I would certainly encourage them to drop into City Hall with a donation for those fireworks. It takes a lot of money to run those things. $10,000 to be exact is our budgeted amount for the fireworks for Canada Day. So if you enjoyed the fireworks like I did, please drop into City Hall and make a donation towards that. And also, in particular, any groups who are interested in volunteering to make those collections would get a little bit of payback to their organization if they did contribute their time in collecting for that night. So we want to keep these things going, and it's hard to keep them going without volunteers, sponsors, and donations. So thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Gregg.
Well said, Councillor Kepi, on Canada Day. Last month I brought forward an item, and Council approved it, just on distributing a letter requesting an increase in base funding to conservation authorities. At our last meeting, we had, there was some discussion on that letter, and it was inquired upon me as to if that letter could just be distributed to all the members of the Conservation Authority, as well as the Minister of the Treasury Department, which is the Honourable Peter Bethlen-Falvey. So I'm just wondering if our Clerk's Department can redistribute that same approved motion to the members of the Conservation Authority and the Minister of the Treasury.
Good, thank you. Councillor O'Leary, 2 items.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just in response to a couple of questions that I have been asked and other councillors on the City Hall renovations. I know I'm repeating myself, but we didn't build a new City Hall because it would be $12+ million to do so. Our budget for this renovation is 8.6, so that's the reason we didn't tear this down in the first place. And this is a rather new one. All electrical costs at City Hall during the renovations is covered by the general contractor. He has chosen to have the lights on overnight at City Hall parking lot for the safety and security at his own cost. So that's not a city cost with those lights on overnight. And just dealing with the delay of the City Hall renovation, the ad hoc committee hasn't had a whole lot of pushback with the delay. I know that it's taken a little bit longer than we expected. But the 2 things that we're keeping an eye on is quality of work, and Kristen Schreider is there every day and on top of things, and she tells us that the quality of work is very good. We've been through the City Hall on tours. It looks great. We're getting there. We're almost there. As far as the costs go, we're still on budget. The delays, the rent that we have to pay at the professional building is being covered by the contractor. So that doesn't cost us either. So quality of work and cost, we're still on budget. We're almost there. Thank you for your patience.
Thank you. You had 1 other item. Covered them? Okay. Go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to Councillor O'Leary, do you mind just reminding us what was the main purpose and background of why we had to replace that City Hall?
Well, there's a million of them, but there was mold and asbestos in the building that was actually at the point where it was starting to bother our employees. And, this renovation should have been done years and years and years ago. And the fact that we're doing this, it just has to be done, and it has to be done right. We want to assure that the building is good for the next 50 years. So, there's no insulation. The windows, they're just single pane. There's just 100 reasons why it had to be done. But it did have to be done. We had no other choice.
Okay. Marion, go ahead.
If I could just add, I believe the Ministry of Labour would not allow us to turn the heating and air conditioning on in that building, so it was not safe for people to be in there.
Sorry, and I think that's just really important because I know as this process has gone on, some may have forgotten about what the conditions of that building were previously. The reason we did get put in the position to recreate or to renovate City Hall was for those reasons. So I think sometimes we just need to be reminded of our past, why we got there. So,
thank you. Councillor Lemon.
Thank you, Your Worship. I passed around to Council something that is rather fascinating. The first mapping of our region was done in 1631. Pardon? Well, it was started in 1631, and some changes were made. I found this map in the, actually in the United States Library of Congress, and it's rather fascinating that there was this much information about our area known at that time. And one of the things I also found at the same time on page 2 is a drawing of a cour de bois done by the eminent Canadian artist Arthur Hemming. And Hemming has a tie-in to our area. He was from Guelph. One branch of his family named Wagner and lived in that area. And his cousin actually lived in Owen Sound and for a number of years while her husband owned the cement plant. The interesting part about this, it does indicate that our area was being settled way back when. And people were coming into the area, although there wasn't any formal settlement or agreement. And of course, there was a couple of disagreements between the French and the English over who was going to get Canada, and of course, in the end, it's Canadian. But the Library of Congress suggests that this map was done by a Jesuit priest who was later martyred, St. John de Brebeuf. So our history is just about as old as the other side of Georgian Bay. And people were definitely coming into our area, trading and trapping. That was the cour de bois, which at one point were outlawed by the King of France by a solemn declaration. This is part of the heritage of our heritage that hasn't received any recognition, and it hopefully will in the next year or so. Thank you.
Thank you. Our chiefs from the Saugeen Ojibwe Nation kind of will laugh that we've been around since 1631.
Yeah, I realize that, but that's a lot longer than any of us thought that there would have been a mapping of this area. It's a little inaccurate in a couple areas, but it was orally given to St. Jean de Brebeuf, and that's why, for instance, that bay is much larger. But the sound is recognized at that point.
Thank you. So a couple of items that I've attended in the last couple of weeks. We did, I think several of us attended and participated, volunteered an hour or so for Radio for Oncology. $40,000 was raised in a day for the oncology department with the Doc Radio being the host and coordinator, so that was pretty good. On Saturday, I attended the 4th Canadian Division Training Center over in Meaford, or what we still call the Meaford Tank Range. Very, very interesting. It's amazing what our troops go through for training to get in shape. I had a flak jacket on, and then a weapons belt or a vest, and then a backpack, and it wasn't loaded with weapon refills, etc., and it was still probably 100 pounds. So these people can carry 140 pounds for a couple of weeks and still be on their game. It's pretty amazing. Even going into their rooms and the polishing and all the effort that they have to go through to be precise and pay attention to detail is really interesting to see. So that kind of covers what I've been off on the last couple of weeks. I want to thank Kristen and Margaret and Brent for sitting in for Pam and Kate tonight. You did a good job. Thank you very much. So with that, we're at number 18, motion that committee rise.
Moved by myself that the Committee of the Whole rise and report.
All in favor? And that is carried. Number 19.
Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Lemon, that the action taken in Committee of the Whole in considering public meetings, deputations and presentations, public question period, matters arising from correspondence, reports of city staff, consent agenda, committee minutes, matters postponed, motions for which I knew I was going to get caught on one of them. Motions for which notice was previously given and additional business be confirmed by this council.
And all in favor? That is carried. Notices of motion, seeing none. Bylaws.
Through your worship, the bylaws listed for approval on tonight's agenda include the confirmatory bylaw, a bylaw to adopt the terms of reference for the Grey County Compliance Audit Committee and delegate authority to the clerk to appoint the members to the committee. 3 bylaws to execute agreements with Badaski Incorporated for the Rail Trail Industrial Park Compost Site and Industrial Park Public Works Site. A bylaw to amend the appointed officers bylaw to appoint a parking enforcement officer. 2 bylaws to execute street vendor agreements, one with Sugar and Ice and one with Big Bay General Store respecting mobile food businesses. A bylaw to execute a facility use agreement for the 31st Annual Salmon Spectacular. And a bylaw to execute an agreement with Harold Sutherland Construction respecting asphalt resurfacing.
Good, thank you.
Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Lemon, that bylaws number 2018-98, 99, 100, 101, 102, 103, 104, 105, 106, and 107 be passed and enacted.
All in favor? And that is carried, so that completes our business for tonight. So we're adjourned. Hope to see everybody on the weekend at Harbor Fest. Good night.